Explorers, Captain Rogers began, his voice steady and commanding as he stood at the helm of the horizon, his starship glowing faintly against the backdrop of distant stars. I've seen many things in my time, wonders and horrors alike, but there's one story that still sends shivers down my spine. A tale of vengeance, unity, and the sheer will of humanity. Sit tight, and I'll tell you about the day Earth unleashed its ancient fleet. It all began with an act of cruelty, Rogers said, his expression darkening. The Galactic Council, the self-proclaimed arbiters of peace and justice across the galaxy, made a decision that shook the very fabric of human resolve. They executed a human child. Not for any crime, mind you, but because they saw humanity as a threat. A species too ambitious, too volatile, and too dangerous to remain unchecked. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl. That child wasn't just any child. She was the daughter of Ambassador Kira Lorne, humanity's representative on the council. Her name was Lila, and her only crime was being born human. The news spread like wildfire, Rogers continued. Every human colony, every station, every outpost, grief turned to rage in a matter of hours. The council thought we'd bow, that we'd accept their judgment. But they didn't understand what it means to provoke humanity. They didn't know what we were capable of. He gestured to the holographic display behind him, where an image of Earth's ancient fleet appeared. A vast collection of ships, dark and dormant, hidden in the shadows of the Sol system. You see, explorers, long before humanity joined the Galactic Council, we had prepared for war. Back when the galaxy was just a whisper in our radios, we built ships, not for exploration but for survival. Ships designed to defend Earth from threats we couldn't yet imagine. They were called the Sentinels, and for centuries they sat in silence, waiting for a day we prayed would never come. When the Council killed Lila, Rogers said, his voice gaining strength, that day came. Earth's leaders sent a single message to the fleet's command AI, a system older than most of the Council's civilizations. The message was simple: activate. The holographic display shifted, showing the Sentinels awakening, their dormant engines roaring to life. One by one, the Sentinels rose from their slumber. They weren't sleek or elegant like the Council's ships. No, they were hulking, brutal, and built for destruction. Their hulls were scarred from tests and prototypes, their weapons outdated but devastatingly effective. And they were ours. The Council didn't take the threat seriously, Rogers said, shaking his head. To them, we were primitives wielding ancient tools. They sent a fleet to intercept the Sentinels, confident they'd crush us before we reached their core systems. But the Council didn't understand our fleet. They didn't understand us. The hologram showed the Sentinels engaging the Council's fleet in a massive battle. They called us savages, Rogers continued, but those savages had a secret weapon: adaptability. While the Council relied on precision and predictability, our fleet was chaos incarnate. Every Sentinel had been designed with one purpose: to destroy overwhelming odds. The battle wasn't just a fight, it was a message, Rogers said, his tone heavy with meaning. Every shot, every maneuver was a declaration. You cannot break us. He pointed to the hologram, which now showed the Council's fleet in disarray, their advanced tactics crumbling under the relentless assault of Earth's ancient ships. The Sentinels weren't just weapons, they were symbols. Each one bore the names of Earth's fallen heroes, its lost civilizations, its countless sacrifices. And as they tore through the Council's fleet, it was as if the ghosts of humanity's past were fighting alongside them. The Council's core systems fell in days, Rogers said, his voice solemn. Their leaders, once so confident, now begged for peace. But Earth didn't want vengeance. We didn't want domination. We wanted something far greater: accountability. The hologram shifted to show the Council chambers, now under Earth's control. Our leaders stood before the Council, not as conquerors but as equals. They demanded justice, not just for Lila, but for every species the Council had oppressed. And do you know what happened next, explorers? Rogers paused, his eyes scanning the room. The galaxy listened. The Council's arrogance crumbled, and a new era began. One where humanity wasn't just feared, but respected. One where the Council's power was tempered by the voices of the oppressed. So what's the lesson here? Rogers asked, his tone softening. It's not just about vengeance or power. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity isn't just a collection of individuals. We're a force of nature. And when you push us too far, we push back. He stepped back, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. The Sentinels have returned to their slumber, but their story lives on. And so does humanity's promise, we will not be silenced. Not by fear. Not by arrogance. Not by anything the galaxy throws our way. Explorers, Captain Rogers began, his voice steady as he leaned against the control panel of the Horizon's bridge. The stars outside gleamed softly, a backdrop to the weight of the tale he was about to share. We've faced enemies before, ruthless conquerors, alien tyrants, you name it. But nothing quite compares to the time the Galactic Council made the mistake of invoking a forgotten part of Earth's ancient history. Sit back, and let me tell you about the day Earth reminded the galaxy of the cost of betrayal. It all started with a promise, Rogers began, his voice tinged with reverence. A promise humanity made long before we joined the Galactic Council. Back in the days when Earth was still reaching for the stars, our leaders knew that the galaxy wouldn't always be kind. They knew there would come a time when diplomacy would fail, and we'd need something to protect our people. The holographic display behind him came to life, showing an ancient Earth treaty etched into digital stone. This promise was called the Sentinel Code, Rogers explained. It stated that if any action taken by an external force directly endangered humanity's future, be it through war, sabotage, or betrayal, the code would activate. And when that happened, there would be no turning back. It wasn't just the murder of a child, Rogers said, his expression darkening. It was the arrogance that followed. The Galactic Council didn't just kill Lila Lorne, they erased her existence. Wiped her name from their archives, silenced every mention of her across their networks. To them, she was an inconvenience to be forgotten. But to us, he paused, his gaze hardening. To us, she was a symbol, a beacon of what we fought to protect. And when they tried to erase her, they unknowingly triggered the Sentinel Code. It had been dormant for centuries, buried deep within Earth's oldest systems. But once it was activated, there was no stopping it. The first sign came from an old satellite, Rogers continued, his voice gaining momentum. It was one of humanity's first interstellar probes, forgotten, obsolete, drifting aimlessly through the void. But when the code activated, that satellite came to life. Its ancient transmitters began broadcasting a signal, a rallying cry, summoning the Sentinels from their slumber. The hologram shifted, showing a network of signals spreading across the Sol system. Dormant fleets hidden in asteroid belts, buried under Martian sands, even cloaked in the icy depths of Europa. Each one answered the call. These weren't just ships, explorers. They were Earth's last line of defense, designed for a war that had never come. Until now. When the Council realized what was happening, they panicked, Rogers said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. They scrambled to intercept the signal, to stop the fleet before it could awaken. But they were too late. The Sentinels were already rising, and they weren't waiting for permission to act. The hologram displayed the massive Sentinel fleet assembling near Earth, their hulls dark and battle-scarred but bristling with weapons. The Council sent envoys, trying to de-escalate the situation. They claimed the murder was a necessary precaution, a way to maintain balance in the galaxy. But humanity wasn't interested in excuses. We wanted justice. The first clash happened near Ganymede, Rogers said, gesturing to the hologram. The Council's fleet, gleaming, pristine, overconfident, met the Sentinels head-on. They thought their advanced technology would give them the edge. They were wrong. The display showed the battle in vivid detail. Sentinel ships unleashing devastating salvos, their brute force tactics overwhelming the Council's precision maneuvers. The Sentinels weren't just ships, they were fortresses. Each one carried enough firepower to level a planet, and they fought with the fury of a species pushed to the brink. But here's where it gets interesting, Rogers said, his tone shifting. The Council assumed they were fighting an ancient fleet, outdated and predictable. What they didn't know was that the Sentinels had evolved. Over the centuries, they'd been learning, adapting, improving themselves. They didn't just fight the Council, they outthought them. The hologram zoomed in on one of the Sentinel ships, its AI core glowing with eerie intelligence. Every time the Council adapted, the Sentinels adapted faster. They exploited weaknesses the Council didn't even know they had, turning their own tactics against them. It was a masterclass in the art of war. The battle raged for days, Rogers said, his voice steady. And as the Council's forces crumbled, they resorted to desperation. They targeted civilian colonies, trying to force Earth into submission. But that was their final mistake. He gestured to the hologram, which now showed the Sentinel fleet splitting into smaller groups, each one intercepting Council forces before they could reach their targets. The Sentinels weren't just defending, they were hunting. They dismantled the Council's fleet piece by piece, ensuring no harm would come to our people. When the dust settled, the council was unrecognizable, Rogers said, his tone softening. Their fleet was in ruins, their leaders in disarray. And humanity? We stood tall. Not as conquerors, but as survivors. The hologram shifted to show the council chambers, where Earth's representatives stood before a humbled assembly of alien leaders. Our terms were simple, Rogers explained. Justice for Lila. Reforms to ensure no species would ever face the same fate. And an unshakable reminder that humanity was not to be underestimated. So what's the lesson here, explorers? Rogers asked, his gaze sweeping across the room. It's not just about the Sentinels or the battles they fought. It's about the promise they represented. A promise that humanity would never bow to tyranny, never forget its own, and never let the galaxy dictate our future. He stepped back, his voice steady as he delivered his final words. The Sentinels may have returned to their slumber, but their legacy endures. They're a part of us, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity has the power to rise, to fight, and to prevail. And that, explorers, is a promise we will always keep. Explorers, Rogers continued, pacing slowly across the bridge, the Sentinel Code wasn't just some relic of Earth's paranoid past. It was a warning to the galaxy. If you crossed humanity, there would be consequences. But for centuries, no one had crossed us this far. So, when the Galactic Council took Lila's life, they had no idea what kind of storm they had unleashed. He turned to the holographic display, where the Sentinel Code's activation sequence pulsed in glowing lines of green and gold. The code wasn't just sitting dormant, it was waiting, calculating, watching. It didn't just send a message to our ancient fleet. It awakened humanity's oldest secrets, buried beneath the surface of Earth, hidden within the asteroid belts, and scattered across distant colonies. Forgotten AI systems, prototype weapons, entire networks of technology long thought obsolete. All of it came back online. Rogers paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. This wasn't just a fleet. It was a resurgence of everything humanity had prepared for, should the unthinkable ever happen. The Sentinel Code didn't just wake the fleet, Rogers said, his voice steady but intense. It reached out to every human colony across the galaxy. Civilians, soldiers, scientists. Everyone received the same message: stand together. The hologram shifted to show images of colonies on Mars, Europa, and beyond, their citizens rallying around the Sentinel signal. Engineers worked tirelessly to reactivate dormant defenses, pilots scrambled to train on ancient fighters, and civilians turned factories into war production lines. The Council thought they were facing a fractured species, but they were wrong. In less than a week, humanity became a single, unstoppable force. Every colony, every station, every outpost, united under one goal: protect our own. Meanwhile, the Council was in chaos, Rogers said, his tone carrying a note of satisfaction. They'd expected protests, maybe some resistance. But they didn't expect war. And they certainly didn't expect a war fought with technology older than most of their civilizations. The holographic display zoomed in on the Council's core worlds, showing frantic debates among alien leaders. The Council was arrogant, Rogers continued. They assumed our old tech was a weakness. What they didn't realize was that old tech is simple, reliable, and brutally effective. The Sentinels didn't care about elegance or precision. They cared about results. The first clash at Ganymede wasn't just a skirmish, Rogers said, his voice gaining intensity. It was a reckoning. The hologram displayed the battle in greater detail, showing the Council's sleek, advanced ships moving in perfect formation as they approached the Sentinel fleet. They had us outnumbered 3-1, Rogers explained, and their ships were faster, more agile, and bristling with technology we could barely comprehend. But they underestimated the Sentinels' power and humanity's determination. The Sentinels didn't fight conventionally, Rogers said, a note of pride in his voice. Their tactics were as brutal as they were brilliant. While the Council relied on precision, the Sentinels used brute force. Massive railguns fired rounds the size of buildings, ripping through enemy ships like paper. EMP blasts crippled entire squadrons, leaving them defenseless against our missile barrages. The hologram shifted to show a Sentinel ship smashing into a Council vessel, its reinforced hull slicing through advanced shielding. The Council ships weren't prepared for this kind of combat, Rogers continued. They relied on their tech, their strategies, their arrogance. But the Sentinels? They were fighting for something greater. The Sentinels weren't just machines, Rogers said, leaning forward. They were alive, at least in a way. Their AI cores weren't just following orders. They were learning, adapting, and improving with every battle. The hologram highlighted one of the Sentinel AI cores, glowing with an ominous red light as it analyzed enemy tactics. Every time the Council deployed a new strategy, the Sentinels countered it faster than any human commander could. They didn't just fight, they anticipated. And with every ship they destroyed, they got better. As the battle raged on, the Council grew desperate, Rogers said, his tone darkening. They began targeting civilian colonies, hoping to force humanity into surrender. But the Sentinels had planned for this. The hologram displayed smaller Sentinel ships breaking off from the main fleet, intercepting Council forces before they could reach their targets. The Council thought they could outmaneuver us, Rogers said. But the Sentinels knew every trick in the book, and they had a few of their own. After Ganymede, the Sentinels didn't stop, Rogers said, his voice steady. They pushed deeper into Council territory, dismantling their fleets one by one. The Council's core worlds, planets that had stood untouched for millennia, suddenly found themselves under siege. The hologram shifted to show the Sentinels launching a coordinated assault on a heavily fortified Council planet. These weren't just battles, Rogers explained. They were messages. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. We were making it clear that the Council's tyranny would no longer be tolerated. But here's the thing about the Sentinels, Rogers said, his tone softening. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for humanity's future. The hologram zoomed in on one of the Sentinel AI cores, its glowing light pulsing rhythmically. As the war reached its climax, the Sentinels made a choice. They created a final gambit, a self-sacrificial move that would ensure humanity's survival, no matter the cost. The hologram showed the Sentinels forming a blockade around Earth, their weapons charging for one last, devastating assault. They were ready to destroy themselves if it meant ending the Council's threat. But humanity intervened. Our leaders negotiated a ceasefire, promising to spare the Council if they agreed to our terms. The Council's surrender wasn't just a military victory, Rogers said, his voice filled with pride. It was a moral one. We didn't just force them to back down. We made them understand what it meant to cross humanity. The hologram displayed the Council chambers, where Earth's representatives stood tall before a humbled assembly of alien leaders. Our terms were simple, Rogers explained. Accountability for their actions, reparations for the lives they destroyed, and a new system of governance that ensured no species would ever face the same fate. The Sentinels returned to their slumber, Rogers said, his tone softening. But their legacy lives on. They're a reminder of what humanity can achieve when we stand together. A symbol of our resilience, our ingenuity, and our unbreakable spirit. He turned to his crew, his gaze steady. So, explorers, remember this. The galaxy may not always understand us. They may fear us, hate us, or underestimate us. But when we stand united, there's nothing we can't overcome. Rogers stepped back, letting the weight of his words settle. And that, my friends, is the story of the Forgotten Code, and the day humanity reminded the galaxy of what we're truly capable of. Explorers, Captain Rogers began, his voice resonating with authority as he stood at the helm of the horizon. The stars outside shimmered softly, their light faint compared to the fire in his words. You've heard tales of humanity's defiance, of our unyielding spirit when faced with impossible odds. But there's one story, a story that still echoes across the galaxy, that captures what it truly means to be human. Let me tell you about the day Earth unleashed its ancient fleet in what came to be known as the Reckoning of Soul. It started with a tragedy, Rogers said, his tone heavy. The Galactic Council, in their arrogance, believed they could control us. They thought humanity was a species that could be molded, subdued. And to make their point, they committed an unforgivable act. They executed a human child, Lila Lorne, the daughter of Earth's ambassador. They called it justice. His hands gripped the railing tightly as he leaned forward. But to us, it was murder. It wasn't just a child they killed. It was hope. Innocence. And when you take that from humanity, you awaken something far more dangerous. The Council believed they understood humanity, Rogers continued. They thought we were an open book, that our technology and defenses were all laid bare. What they didn't know was that humanity had secrets. Buried deep within the Sol system lay our last resort, an ancient fleet, built long ago for a war that never came. The holographic display came alive, showing the dark hulks of Earth's forgotten ships, hidden in asteroid belts, cloaked within the rings of Saturn, and resting in the icy shadows of Pluto. These weren't ordinary ships, Rogers explained. They were monuments to humanity's ingenuity and paranoia, designed in an era when we believed the galaxy would come for us. And when the Council killed Lila, we made the decision to awaken them. The order went out, Rogers said, his voice gaining momentum. A single command, broadcast from Earth to every corner of the Sol system: activate. The hologram shifted, showing the ancient fleet stirring to life. Engines ignited, weapons powered up, and AIs long dormant began to hum with activity. They called them the Eternals, Rogers said, a flicker of pride in his voice. Ships built to outlast time itself. Their hulls were scarred, their systems old, but they were unstoppable. And for the first time in centuries, they had a mission: protect humanity, at any cost. The Council didn't take the threat seriously, Rogers said, shaking his head. They sent a fleet, a show of force, they called it, to put us in our place. They thought their advanced ships would sweep us aside like debris. The hologram displayed the Council's fleet approaching the Sol system, their ships gleaming with alien precision. But the Council underestimated one thing, Rogers said, his voice hardening. The Eternals weren't just ships. They were a message, a promise, and they were about to teach the galaxy what it means to provoke humanity. The first engagement happened at Saturn, Rogers said, gesturing to the hologram. The Council's fleet entered the rings, confident they could overwhelm the Eternals with superior numbers and firepower. What they didn't realize was that the Eternals had been waiting for this moment for centuries. The hologram zoomed in on the battlefield, Council ships weaving through the icy debris, only to be ambushed by the hulking forms of the Eternals emerging from the shadows. The Eternals weren't fast, Rogers admitted, but they didn't need to be. Their armor was impenetrable, their weapons devastating. Railguns fired slugs the size of skyscrapers, tearing through Council ships like they were made of paper. The Council fought back, Rogers said, his voice carrying a note of respect. They deployed advanced tactics, tried to outmaneuver us, outthink us. But they didn't understand the Eternals. These weren't just machines. They were relics of a time when humanity fought to survive against impossible odds. They were built for this. The hologram showed an Eternal ship absorbing a barrage of Council fire, only to retaliate with a massive energy blast that shattered multiple enemy vessels. And here's the thing, Rogers continued. The Eternals didn't just fight, they learned. Every move the Council made, every strategy they tried, the Eternals adapted. It was like watching evolution in real time. When the Council realized they were losing, they resorted to desperation, Rogers said, his tone dark. They targeted Earth directly, hoping to force our surrender. But that was their final mistake. The hologram displayed the Eternals forming a defensive perimeter around Earth, their weapons glowing with barely contained energy. They called it the Iron Halo, Rogers explained. A wall of ships, unbreakable and immovable. The Council threw everything they had at it, and it wasn't enough. Not even close. And then, Rogers said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, the Eternals unleashed their full power. Weapons that hadn't been fired in centuries roared to life, cutting through the Council's fleet with devastating precision. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a reckoning. The hologram showed the Council's ships disintegrating under the relentless assault, their once proud fleet reduced to wreckage. The galaxy watched in stunned silence, Rogers continued. They'd never seen anything like it. Humanity, the species they thought they could control, had become their greatest fear. When the last Council ship fell, Rogers said, his tone heavy, there was no celebration. No cheering. Just silence. And then the Council surrendered. They had no choice. The hologram shifted to the Council chambers, where Earth's representatives stood before a humbled assembly of alien leaders. Our terms were simple, Rogers said. Justice for Lila. An end to their tyranny. And a promise that humanity would never be underestimated again. The Eternals returned to their slumber, Rogers said, his voice softening. Their mission was complete, their promise fulfilled. But their legacy remains. They're a part of us, a reminder of what we're capable of when we stand together. He turned to his crew, his gaze steady. So, explorers, remember this. Humanity's strength isn't just in our technology or our weapons. It's in our resolve, our unity. And when the galaxy tests us, we rise to the challenge. Every single time. Rogers stepped back, his voice filled with quiet pride. And that, my friends, is the story of the reckoning of Sol. Explorers, Captain Rogers began, his voice steady as he faced his crew on the bridge of the horizon. The vastness of space stretched endlessly behind him, stars twinkling in the black void. I've told you tales of defiance and resilience before, but this one is about retribution. Let me tell you about the time Earth resurrected the Iron Armada, and turned the galaxy's arrogance into ash. It all began with arrogance, Rogers said, leaning on the console as the holographic display came to life behind him. The Galactic Council, those self-proclaimed peacekeepers of the stars, believed themselves untouchable. They ruled through fear, intimidation, and manipulation. But their arrogance blinded them to one truth: humanity doesn't kneel. He paused, letting the tension hang in the air. When the Council executed a human child, Lila Lorne, daughter of Earth's ambassador, they didn't just take a life. They declared war. They believed humanity would cower, broken by their show of dominance. But what they didn't know was that humanity had a weapon forged in the fires of desperation and sealed in the cold of space. We called it the Iron Armada. Long before humanity joined the galactic community, Rogers continued, Earth faced its own extinction-level crises. Climate collapse, nuclear brinkmanship, and rogue artificial intelligences. We survived them all, but not without cost. In the process, we built something extraordinary. A fleet of warships designed to ensure humanity's survival, no matter the enemy. The hologram shifted, showing dark, massive ships floating dormant in the asteroid belts of the Sol system. The Iron Armada wasn't just a fleet, Rogers explained. It was humanity's insurance policy. Built to last, hidden in the shadows, and armed with weapons that could level entire star systems. For centuries, it slept, waiting for a day we prayed would never come. He turned to face his crew, his expression grave. That day came when the Council spilled innocent blood. Earth's leaders didn't hesitate, Rogers said, his voice growing firm. When news of Lila's execution reached the United Terran Alliance, a single command was sent: activate the Iron Armada. The hologram displayed the fleet awakening. Engines that had been silent for centuries roared to life, and weapons systems powered up with blinding energy. The Armada was ancient, yes, but it was also terrifyingly effective. Its ships were built from the strongest alloys Earth could forge, equipped with railguns, plasma cannons, and missile silos capable of launching payloads the size of small cities. And its command AI, the Core Sentinel, was a masterpiece of human ingenuity and paranoia. It didn't just follow orders, it strategized, adapted, and led. The Galactic Council didn't take the threat seriously at first, Rogers said, shaking his head. They sent a single fleet, sleek, advanced ships brimming with the latest technology. Their goal was simple: destroy the Iron Armada before it could fully awaken. The hologram displayed the Council's fleet approaching the asteroid belt, where the Armada lay dormant. But the Council had no idea what they were walking into, Rogers said, his voice dropping to a near growl. They underestimated our resolve, our ingenuity, and our willingness to fight. And they paid for it. The first battle took place near Titan, Rogers said, gesturing to the hologram as it zoomed in on Saturn's largest moon. The Council's fleet arrived, confident they'd catch the Armada off guard. What they didn't realize was that the Core Sentinel had been waiting for them. The display shifted to show the Armada springing to life, its ships emerging from the shadows of Saturn's rings. Railguns fired in unison, sending hypervelocity projectiles tearing through the Council's formation. Plasma cannons lit up the void, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. It wasn't a battle, Rogers said, a grim smile on his face. It was an ambush. The Council's fleet didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, their ships were either destroyed or retreating. The victory at Titan sent a message, Rogers said, his tone hard. Humanity wasn't going to roll over and die. We were coming for the Council, and nothing would stop us. The hologram displayed the Armada moving through the galaxy, systematically dismantling every fleet the Council sent against it. Planets that had once been strongholds of Council power now found themselves at the mercy of Earth's vengeance. The Armada didn't just destroy fleets, Rogers continued. It liberated entire systems. Species that had suffered under the Council's rule joined our cause, inspired by humanity's defiance. The Armada wasn't just a force of destruction. It became a beacon of hope. As the Armada closed in on the Council's core worlds, their leaders grew desperate, Rogers said, his voice carrying a note of disdain. They turned to scorched earth tactics, targeting human colonies and allied planets in an attempt to force Earth into submission. But the Armada was always one step ahead. The hologram showed the Armada intercepting Council fleets before they could strike, its ships protecting colonies and allies with unrelenting efficiency. The Core Sentinel didn't just command the Armada, Rogers explained. It predicted the Council's moves, countered their strategies, and ensured that humanity's people remained safe. The final battle took place at Azura Prime, Rogers said, his voice steady. The Council's capital world, a fortress planet protected by an armada of its own. The hologram displayed the Iron Armada facing off against the Council's defenses, a massive array of ships, orbital platforms, and planetary weapons. The odds were against us, Rogers admitted, but the core Sentinel didn't flinch. It coordinated a multi-pronged assault, exploiting weaknesses in the Council's defenses and turning their own systems against them. The display showed the Armada breaking through the Council's defenses, its ships descending on Azura Prime like an unstoppable tide. The battle wasn't just a fight, it was a statement, Rogers said. Humanity would not be silenced. Not by fear. Not by tyranny. Not by anything. When the dust settled, the Council was no more, Rogers said, his voice heavy with finality. Their fleets were destroyed, their leaders captured, and their capital reduced to rubble. Humanity didn't just win, we reshaped the galaxy. The hologram displayed Earth's representatives standing in the ruins of the Council chambers, addressing a galaxy that had been forever changed. Our message was simple, Rogers said. Never again. Never again would the Council wield its power unchecked. Never again would the galaxy live in fear of their judgment. Humanity had risen, and we weren't going anywhere. After the war, the Armada returned to its slumber, Rogers said, his tone softening. Its mission was complete, its promise fulfilled. But its legacy lives on. He turned to his crew, his gaze steady and filled with pride. The Armada is a reminder of what humanity can achieve when we stand together. A symbol of our strength, our resilience, and our determination to protect what we hold dear. And let me tell you, explorers, if the galaxy ever forgets that lesson, the Iron Armada will rise again. Rogers stepped back, his voice filled with quiet triumph. And that, my friends, is the story of the rise of the Iron Armada. Explorers, Captain Rogers began, standing tall at the front of the bridge. The stars outside the viewport seemed to dim, as if the weight of his words was drawing in the light. There are moments in history that define who we are, not just as a species, but as a force in the galaxy. This is a story of unity, sacrifice, and the day humanity stood as the vanguard against tyranny. Let me tell you about the day Earth became more than a world. It became a promise. The Galactic Council had always presented itself as the great protector of peace, Rogers said, pacing slowly. But beneath their polished exterior lay something far darker. They believed in peace, yes, but only the peace that came from obedience. And when humanity refused to bow, they made an example of us. He turned, his face grim. They killed Lila Lorne. A child. Innocent, unarmed, and full of life. Her only crime was being human. The hologram behind him flickered to life, showing an image of Lila, smiling, carefree, unaware of the storm her death would ignite. Her execution wasn't just a tragedy, Rogers continued. It was a betrayal. And it was the moment humanity realized that the Council didn't see us as equals. They saw us as a problem to be solved. Earth's leaders didn't hesitate, Rogers said, his voice gaining strength. They knew that the Council had crossed a line, and there was no going back. But humanity didn't respond with rage or blind violence. We responded with precision, strategy, and something the Council didn't understand. Unity. The hologram shifted to show a map of the Sol system, with signals spreading from Earth to its colonies. For centuries, humanity had prepared for the worst. Our ancestors, scarred by war and conflict, had built something extraordinary, a hidden network of ships, weapons, and technology designed to protect Earth from any threat. We called it the Vanguard Protocol. The protocol wasn't just a fleet, Rogers explained. It was a vision, a plan for humanity's survival, created in secret and hidden from even our closest allies. When the Council killed Lila, the protocol activated. And what it unleashed was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The hologram displayed massive hangars opening on the dark side of the moon, ancient ships rising from beneath the surface of Mars, and cloaked vessels emerging from the asteroid belts. These weren't just warships, Rogers said. They were symbols of our determination, each one named after a battle, a hero, or a moment in Earth's history when we refused to give up. The Vanguard was more than a fleet. It was a testament to who we are. The Council underestimated us, Rogers said, shaking his head. They thought humanity was fractured, unprepared. So they sent a fleet to crush us before the Vanguard could fully mobilize. It was a mistake they wouldn't live to repeat. The hologram showed the Council's fleet approaching Earth, their ships gleaming with alien power. The Vanguard met them at the edge of the Sol system, Rogers continued. A wall of ships, bristling with weapons, engines roaring to life. The Council's commanders called it a suicide mission. But humanity called it justice. The first clash was at the Kuiper Belt, Rogers said, his tone intense. The Council's fleet outnumbered us 3-1. Their ships were faster, more advanced, and backed by centuries of technological superiority. But the Vanguard had something they didn't: purpose. The hologram displayed the battle in vivid detail. Vanguard ships using the natural debris of the Kuiper Belt as cover, ambushing the Council's fleet with devastating precision. Our ships weren't sleek or elegant, Rogers admitted. They were brutal, efficient, and built to withstand anything the Council could throw at us. And they fought with the fury of a species protecting its home. The display showed a massive Vanguard ship ramming a Council vessel, its reinforced hull shattering the enemy's defenses. The Council thought they could intimidate us, Rogers said. Instead, they learned what it means to face humanity at its strongest. As the Vanguard pushed forward, something incredible happened, Rogers said, his voice softening. Other species, long oppressed by the Council, began to rise up. They saw humanity not as a threat, but as a beacon, a force willing to stand against tyranny. The hologram shifted to show alien ships joining the Vanguard, their captains pledging allegiance to Earth's cause. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore, Rogers explained. We were fighting for everyone who had suffered under the Council's rule. The Vanguard became more than a fleet. It became a movement. The turning point came at Polaris Station, Rogers said, gesturing to the hologram. A massive Council stronghold, protected by layers of defenses and an armada of their finest ships. The Council believed it was untouchable. They were wrong. The display showed the Vanguard coordinating a multi-pronged assault, using advanced tactics to dismantle Polaris Station's defenses. The battle wasn't just about brute force, Rogers said. It was about strategy, precision, and the unbreakable will of humanity and our allies. Polaris fell, and with it, the Council's grip on the galaxy began to crumble. The Council's last stronghold was Aurora Prime, Rogers said, his tone heavy with anticipation. A fortress world, protected by weapons capable of vaporizing entire fleets. They thought it was impenetrable. But the Vanguard wasn't just a fleet, it was hope. And hope doesn't surrender. The hologram displayed the Vanguard's approach, its ships forming a tight formation as they faced the Council's final defenses. The battle was fierce, Rogers said. Ships were lost, lives were sacrificed, but the Vanguard pressed on. We weren't just fighting for Earth. We were fighting for the future of the galaxy. The display showed the moment the Vanguard broke through Aurora Prime's defenses, their ships descending on the planet like an unstoppable force. And when it was over, Rogers said, the Council's reign was finished. The Council surrendered, Rogers said, his voice softening. Their leaders were taken into custody, their fleets dismantled, and their systems liberated. The galaxy was free, not just because of the Vanguard, but because of what it represented: unity, resilience, and the power of standing together. The hologram displayed scenes of celebration across the galaxy, species of all kinds raising their voices in triumph. Humanity didn't just save itself, Rogers said. We became the Vanguard for a new era, one where no species would live in fear of tyranny. The Vanguard returned to its hidden harbors, Rogers said, his tone reverent. Its mission was complete, but its legacy endures. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, we have the power to rise, to fight, and to inspire. He turned to his crew, his gaze filled with pride. So, explorers, remember this: we are more than just individuals. We are humanity. And when we stand together, there is nothing we cannot overcome. Rogers stepped back, his voice steady and filled with quiet determination. And that, my friends, is the story of the day Earth became the Vanguard.